What if I told you that without Australia, entire nations would face economic collapse, energy blackouts, and food shortages within months? One country relies on Australia for 98% of a resource they literally can't survive without. You're about to see how one island continent keeps 10 nations from falling apart. But wait, before we begin, please subscribe to ensure you never miss out on any of my essential content. Comment, "I subscribed," below, and I'll personally welcome you to our community. With that said, let's get started. Picture this: empty supermarkets, dark cities, factories closing by the thousands. According to the Australian Trade and Investment Commission's 2024 report, Australia exports over $450 billion worth of critical resources annually. For some countries, that's not just business, it's survival. Imagine waking up to no electricity, no steel production, no food imports. For millions of people, Australia is the thin line preventing that nightmare. Let's start with number 10. And trust me, by the time we reach number 1, you'll never look at global trade the same way again. 10. South Korea. One of the world's tech giants has a secret weakness: Australia. It supplies 65% of South Korea's iron ore and 38% of its coal. Those aren't just numbers, they're the lifeblood of South Korea's economy. Ji-hoon, a factory manager in Ulsan, experienced this firsthand in 2023 when Australian coal shipments were delayed for just 2 weeks due to port strikes. His steel plant had to cut production by 40%, sending over 200 workers home. A 2023 study in the Journal of East Asian Economic Integration found that without Australian resources, South Korea's manufacturing sector would contract by 12% annually. South Korea has almost zero domestic iron ore. No Australia means no smartphones, no cars, no infrastructure. 9. Vietnam. Vietnam's explosive growth over the last decade is powered by Australian resources. Australia is Vietnam's largest supplier of wheat, providing 45% of total imports, and a major supplier of coal for energy generation. When Australian wheat exports were disrupted by floods in 2022, Hanoi bakery owner Lin saw flour prices triple, forcing her to close 2 of her 3 locations. Once Australia's harvest recovered in 2023, she reopened and rehired her staff. The Vietnamese Ministry of Industry reports that 62% of the country's thermal power plants run on Australian coal. Without it, the lights go out. Vietnam is investing in solar power, but it'll take a decade to make a real difference. 8. Thailand. Thailand, the land of smiles, has a hidden vulnerability that could wipe out millions of jobs overnight. Australia provides 72% of Thailand's alumina, used to make aluminum, and 34% of its beef imports. When Australian alumina shipments were delayed in 2021, smelting plants in Rayong ran at just 55% capacity for months. A 2023 report by Thailand's National Economic and Social Development Council found that disruptions in Australian alumina could eliminate 78,000 manufacturing jobs. Thailand's own bauxite mines are too small to replace Australian imports, they're stuck. 6. Taiwan. The semiconductor capital of the world runs on Australian coal and gas. Australia provides 24% of Taiwan's coal and 19% of its liquefied natural gas. When shipments were delayed in 2022, rolling blackouts hit Taiwan's industrial zones, halting chip production and throwing the global tech industry into chaos. A 2023 report by the Taiwan Institute of Economic Research estimated that a 6-month disruption in Australian energy imports would cost Taiwan $47 billion. Taiwan has almost no domestic energy resources. Without Australian energy, the world's tech supply chain collapses. No power, no chips, no iPhones, no cars, no computers. 5. Indonesia. Home to 280 million people, Indonesia depends heavily on Australia for food. Australia supplies 86% of Indonesia's live cattle imports and 52% of its wheat. In 2020, when Australia temporarily banned live exports due to animal welfare concerns, rancher Budi in Jakarta lost everything. A 2024 study by Indonesia's Centre for Agricultural Policy found that without Australian cattle, beef prices would rise by 340%, making meat unaffordable for most Indonesians. Indonesia is trying to boost domestic cattle farming, but it'll take 15 to 20 years to meet demand. 4. India's rising superpower status hides a crucial weakness buried in Australian mines. Australia supplies 58% of India's coking coal, essential for steel production. When coal prices spiked in 2022 due to the Russia-Ukraine war, steel mill manager Arjun in Mumbai had to lay off 400 workers. Without Australian coal, India's infrastructure projects, roads, bridges, metro systems, would grind to a halt. A 2023 report in the Indian Journal of Industrial Economics found that a 50% reduction in Australian coal imports would shrink India's GDP by 2.1%. India is the world's second largest steel producer, but it can't make steel without Australia. 3. The Philippines, with 115 million people, is one bad harvest away from famine, and Australia is their lifeline. Australia provides 89% of the Philippines' wheat imports and 44% of its dairy. When wheat shipments were delayed in 2023, bread prices rose 60%. A 2024 study by the Philippine Institute for Development Studies found that the country would face a severe malnutrition crisis without Australian imports. The Philippines can't grow wheat, the climate won't allow it. Bangladesh, one of the world's fastest-growing economies, runs on Australian energy. Australia supplies 38% of its coal and 27% of its LNG. When coal shipments were delayed in 2022, factory owner Rashid in Dhaka endured a 3-day blackout, losing $200,000 in orders. The World Bank estimates that sustained energy shortages would cut Bangladesh's GDP growth by 4.7%, pushing 12 million people back into poverty. Bangladesh has almost no domestic energy resources, it's 100% import dependent. 1. Japan, the world's third largest economy, is held together by one invisible thread, Australian resources. Australia supplies 62% of Japan's iron ore, 68% of its coal, and 42% of its LNG. In 2022, when coal shipments were delayed for just 10 days, an Osaka steel plant nearly shut down. A 2024 study in the Japanese Political Economy Journal concluded that a 6-month disruption in Australian resource exports would trigger an 8 to 11% contraction in Japan's GDP. Japan has no iron ore, no coal, and no natural gas. Everything is imported. To secure its future, Japan has invested $18 billion in Australian mining projects and long-term contracts lasting decades. It's not just business, it's survival. Japan is pivoting to hydrogen and nuclear energy, but even with aggressive investments, energy independence is still 30 years away. So here's the billion-dollar question. If you were the leader of one of these countries, would you risk everything by relying on a single foreign supplier? Or would you sacrifice growth to become self-sufficient, even if it took decades? Drop your answer below and tell us which country shocked you most. Was it Japan at number 1, or another on the list? And if you enjoyed this, smash that subscribe button. More videos are coming that will change how you see the global economy forever.